Melanie D, and I'm back with Corpse Garden Chronicles with another spooky story to share with you today. From the book Nightmare Whispers, the collection. The story is named Roza by Michael Guzman. "Come on, sister. We have to hurry back before sunset," Roza called to her younger sister, Caitlin. "I'm coming. I got the list of ingredients for dinner," Caitlin called back, a basket of vegetables in one arm and a wheel of cheese in the other. She brought them to the wagon that her older sister was waiting in. Being the daughters of the town blacksmith, they usually went out to sell the tools he created and used the money to purchase the goods that their family needed. But tonight was a special night, one that the whole town turned out for. It would make things difficult for their family for them not to show. "I really hope it's not going to be us this time," Caitlin said to Roza as they started on their trip home. "I couldn't bear it." "I know," Roza replied, as she let one hand release the reins of the horse and gave Caitlin a one-armed hug. "It's wrong. No one should have to do this. It's horrible that it's become a tradition, so everyone can justify it." "Can't we do something else? Anything else?" Caitlin asked Roza, turned away from her, not being able to look her in the eye as she replied. "That's the worst part about this. There really isn't any other way." They continued home in a heavy silence. Even though they arrived in time, their parents stood outside anxiously waiting. "Hurry, get the horse in the stable," their father, Adelbert, said firmly. "We can worry about unloading the wagon later. We don't want to be late. What will happen if we are?" "Has anyone ever been late since this whole thing started?" Caitlin asked. "Once, and I won't repeat what happened in that case." "Just know you wouldn't want it to happen again to anyone," their mother Julie said. Just then they heard the sound of the church bells ring. "Last call," Adelbert announced. Come on." He hurried his family towards the outside of the church, where all the local families were gathering, as his family was the last to arrive, just making it when the 13th bell sounded. Adelbert was getting a lot of dirty looks from his peers. "Glad everyone could make it," the baritone voice of the town mayor announced, glancing at the last-minute family. "The time has come once again, as it has these past 20 years. As we make our harvest, so too must we allow our beloved queen her own harvest. Prepare the lottery." The mayor was flanked on either side by a guard in shiny armor, each with a halberd at their shoulder and a sword on their belt. There was also a pair of aides to the mayor, who brought forth a basket with wooden tiles and a large vase. Upon each tile is the name of the head of the household. There are those that are exempt, and you may take a step back. However, you must remain as witness, so all will know that the section was performed in a just manner. First, the family with no daughters at all, you may step back. The crowd parted as a small group of families with no children or only sons stepped out of the circle. Secondly, the families with daughters too young for selection, you may step back. A second group of families with daughters that have not yet reached the age of womanhood step back in relief. Finally, the families who have had someone selected previously, you may step back. The last group looked the most confident, as they no longer had anything to fear. The remaining families stepped closer and formed a tighter circle, with the exempt families forming an outer circle surrounding them. Now I shall start drawing lots until the name belonging to someone in the inner circle is called, the mayor explained. All the families in the inner circle noticeably up. Adalbert was clinging to his wife tightly, their daughters to either side of them. The mayor poured the tiles from the white basket into the thin-lipped vase with a loud chatter. Now all shall witness. I have no foreknowledge of the names to be drawn. One of the aides held the vase up to the mayor. Swishing the tiles around, the mayor faced the crowd, thrust his hand inside, and withdrew a tile. Bringing it towards his face, he announced, "Steiner family," and turned the tile around and showed it to the anxious crowd, who held their breath. "Here, the head of one of the exempt families announced from the back." "Very well, next tile," the mayor announced, discarding the first one back into the basket, before drawing another one. "Adalbert family," the mayor called out. Roza paled deeply, and her sister and mother clung to her. "No, not my Roza," Julie cried out, and Adalbert stepped forward protectively. "This isn't fair," he declared. "This is retaliation for being the last ones here," he insisted. "Show us the tile." This got the crowd roused, part into support of the blacksmith, part in support of the mayor. The guards tensed, looking ready to break up a potential riot. "You doubt my integrity?" The mayor glared at Adalbert. "You always show us the tile after reading it, so show it," Adalbert insisted. "The selection is always fair and just," the mayor replied, and turned the tile so Adalbert and the crowd could see it. Indeed, bear his name. "You can't have her," Adalbert growled. The two guards moved towards the family, their halberds pointed towards him. "We can forgive such displays only once," the mayor said dangerously. "You have been honored. Your daughter will forever be a hero to this town. You should be happy for her. Her new life will be better than all of ours. You can't have her," Adalbert continued, until Julie put her hand on his shoulder and shook her head. "Don't, or it will be all of us," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "We aren't without compassion," the mayor said. "You have tonight and tomorrow morning to say your goodbyes. After that, your daughter is no longer yours. Unless you intend to break the agreement and risk everyone in the town." Adalbert looked around at the faces of his fellow townsfolk. Their expressions ranged from sympathy to fear to aggression. "It's not worth the fight," Julie whispered to her husband. "Let's make the last night the best we can." "Fine, but don't think I don't hold this whole agreement in the highest contempt, and you for continuing it," Adalbert said. "We are men, not cattle. We are what we need to be to survive," the mayor said. "Have Rosa's name added to the register of heroines at once." He ordered the guards. "Escort them home and make sure they don't leave until it's time for their daughter to make her journey." He then turned to his aides. "Make sure the dress is delivered in time to their home as well." The next morning, Roza looked at her reflection in the mirror. She checked over the dress that was standard for the young woman chosen for this honor. It was beautiful shade of red, the favored color of her new mistress. It had a wide open neck, leaving her shoulders exposed and showing a generous amount of cleavage. Greatly enhanced by the tight corset, Julie thought her silent sobs assisted in putting it on her daughter. The arms of the dress and the length of the skirt had a gold trim in the pattern of roses, added to the illusion of Roza as the flower she was named for. Little did anyone, even Rosa's mother, know that this particular rose will soon show its thorns. As Julie finished with the dress and her raven hair now in a long, thin braid, reaching to just above her waist, Roza took a deep breath and reached out to her reflection, as if to say goodbye to herself. After all, her plan, as brave as it was, probably wouldn't succeed. Roza then turned around to face her loving mother, who looked on the verge of collapse. Catching her in an embrace before she fell, Roza whispered, "It will be okay. After all, you'll always have Caitlin," she whispered, reminding her mother that by the rules of the lottery her sister was now untouchable. Rosa's mother simply couldn't reply, other than more silent, dry sobbing. It was all she had left after spending last night wailing at the evil indifference of the world and clutching to her husband, who tried to be strong for his beloved family despite the self-loathing at his own powerlessness. Despite her attempt at strength, Roza broke down and wept. It seemed an eternity before the two women were interrupted in the private moment of mourning by a loud knock at the door. "It's time," Albert announced. It's open," Roza said, getting to her feet and helping her mother do the same, waiting to show her father some measure of courage as he entered. Adelbert was always an icon of strength to Roza. When it came to his girls, he was the most compassionate father and the gentlest husband. Nothing meant more to him than his family. Roza tried to restrain her gasp at seeing the redness in her father's eyes and defeat. Something she never saw before. Caitlin was right behind him, still in her sleepwear, completely disheveled. This was a message in itself, as the girl strived to look her best first thing every morning. Don't go," Caitlin begged, sounding like she did long ago when she was a toddler wanting to tag along with her big sister instead of the girl a few years shy of adulthood herself. I have to. You know why," Roza whispered back. "If I don't, everyone—" She couldn't even finish the horrific thought. Caitlin just rushed towards Roza with a wail and clutched onto her older sister like a lifeline. Roza returned the embrace and whispered in her younger sister's ear, "You have to take care of Mother and Father, for both of us. Can you do that for me?" "I need you," Caitlin breathed back. "I know. But they will need you more. I love you, Caitlin." Roza pulled her sister off gently, kissing the top of her head. The sight was too much for their parents, who also bent down and embodied their girls tightly to share their grief. "Mother, Father, Sister, try not to hate them," Roza said. "You know the other things we tried didn't work. It really is the only way," though she said that more to convince herself rather than her family. They were interrupted once again by an even louder knock. "Give us a moment, for God's sakes," Adelbert demanded. Melanie D with Part 2 of Roza by Michael Guzman. I will start close to where I left off last time. Sorry I had to break it into 2 parts. Mother, father, sister, try not to hate them, Rosa said. You know the other things we tried didn't work. It is really the only way, though she said that more to convince herself rather than her family. They were interrupted once again by an even louder knock. "Give us a moment, for God's sakes," Adelbert demanded, glaring daggers at the guard, who appeared at the threshold of her daughter's room. "You were told to say your goodbyes quickly," the guard reminded him, sounding harsh, but his eyes betrayed his sympathy. "If we don't reach the castle by sundown, you know it voids our contract with her, and then we all lose." Rosa nodded. She gave each of them a kiss on the cheek and squeezed their hands. "I love you all. Take care of each other." "If you would follow me," the guard said, gesturing towards the exit. Rosa nodded and followed him, not daring to look back at her family for fear of losing what little resolve she had left. She hurried to prepare carriage, ignoring the stares of her fellow villagers, as most put up facades of indifference to try to sleep better at night, knowing the fate of the young woman selected. The carriage arrived at the castle a mere half-hour before sundown. The driver and guard who accompanied her said nothing as Rosa exited the carriage. The driver then turned the carriage around as quickly as possible, and his horses were practically flying to get away from even the sight of the castle. Ahead, it would be another half-hour of walking before Rosa arrived. The wind brought a constant chill to her as she noticed the vegetation getting more and more sparse as she got closer to her destination. The castle itself was huge, as wide as the entire center of her town, and taller than the tallest tree Rosa ever saw. The roofing was blood red in color, and the stonework was gray as dark, angry thunderclouds. The young woman's breathing intensified as she approached the castle, large oak doors, her heart threatening to leap out of her chest. The demonic-looking knocker seemed to stare at her as she raised her hand to grab the metal ring in the mouth of one. She slammed it against the door loudly multiple times. It was futile, but satisfying expression of her anger and frustration. The door opened with a deafening groan, causing Rosa to clutch at her chest. Peeking in, she saw that the hall was illuminated by the dying sunlight that snuck through the stained-glass windows to one side. Windows that depicted scenes of chained women weeping blood, demons slaying angels, and fire consuming a village similar to hers. Frozen in horror, Rosa lost her resolve to encounter, but a powerful feeling overcame the young woman, demanding she continued. Hand still to her chest, she walked into the threshold of her doom. She looked behind her to see what manner of servant opened the door, but saw nothing as the door slammed shut with finality. With no other recourse open, Rosa continued her walk down the lonely hall, the last light of the sun finally leaving as unexpected relief washed over her, as she no longer had to look at the visions of the windows. It was pitch black only for a moment, as a soft glow appeared at the end of the hall, calling to her like a moth to a flame. Rosa emerged in a large room, which suddenly lit up as candles ignited all around her. Rosa looked around in confusion, wondering who or what was doing this. Witchcraft, just as they said, she thought. "Welcome, my dear," Roza turned to find the source of the voice and looked up a wide staircase, one she swore wasn't there a moment ago. She glanced upon a striking woman with bright red hair that was braided and wrapped around her head, held by beautiful pearl pins. Her lips were a crimson deeper than blood, and her skin pale as marble. Her dress was red with white sleeves and a neckline similar to the dress Roza wore. The young woman took a moment to dare look the figure in the eyes and recoiled in horror. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul, but the blackness of this woman's eyes contained nothingness, absolute nothingness. "What is the name of the girl they sent me this time?" the woman demanded sharply, as she seemed to glare slowly down the steps. Roza licked her lips and took a moment to respond, her mouth growing dry. "Roza, you're the Countess?" she said. She felt uncertain of everything, even her own name, in the company of the unnatural presence. "Of course I am. You don't see anyone else here, do you?" she mocked. Roza blinked and looked around to see if anyone else really was here, and when she looked back, the Countess Elizabeth stood directly in front of her. She didn't hear the woman run, but even if she did, Roza doubted anyone could cover that distance so quickly. Roza, an appropriate name for such a lovely flower. The Countess smiled, tracing her fingernail over Roza's cheek in a mockery of a lover's touch. "I think you'll do nicely." She's close enough now," Roza screamed at herself as she reached into the folds of her dress and pulled out the dagger her father forged years ago. When Countess Elizabeth first arrived at the village, it had never been used. Once everyone realized how futile it was to resist the Countess. Roza refused to look into the eyes of this monster, and she drove the dagger into her heart. She released a loud scream for justice and vengeance for all the girls that had been forced to come to the Countess before her. Roza backed away, sitting on the cold floor, her breath ragged. She looked down, her hand over her heart, and whispered, I did it." After a brief pause, Roza heard a tisk. She looked in horror as the Countess Elizabeth pulled the knife from her chest and smiled. "Was that supposed to hurt?" No, it's impossible," Roza gasped and scooted back slowly. "The blade, it was silver, right?" Countess Elizabeth continued to smile as the wound on her bosom sealed itself until it was perfection again. Perfection it was a moment ago. The Countess stared at Roza. "To your feet, girl," her voice boomed through the empty hall. No matter how much Roza wanted to remain on the ground, to even show the smallest defiance, her body refused to obey. Next thing she knew, she was standing as stiff as a soldier at attention. Countess Elizabeth dropped the dagger with a deafening clatter, then walked slowly towards the young girl, raising her right hand with a flick. Her fingernails grew to the length of daggers. She walked slowly around Roza. "I wonder, do you have any more surprises for me?" Elizabeth asked. She slashed her razor-sharp nails down the back of Roza's dress, serving the cords that held it and her corset together. a blade either coated in or maybe made of silver. She stared at Roza, felt the tension of her dress slacken. Then the Countess was in front of her. "Garlic?" the Countess shouted, as she slashed again, rendering the front of Rosa's dress apart completely, but miraculously or by design not touching the girl's skin. Roza desperately wanted to move even an inch to try to hold the tattered remains of her dress and modesty together, but she felt like a field mouse before a viper. "A wooden stake through the heart," Elizabeth continued, listing as what remained of the dress pulled around Rosa's feet. Goosebumps covered her nude form, but Roza knew it wasn't due to the cold. "Holy water?" the Countess grinned, as she inspected her prey. "Exposure to sunlight," and she chuckled at the last one. "The presence of a crucifix? Tell me, girl, have you ever wondered how even an average peasant knows of at least one of these ways to harm or kill those like us?" Not waiting for an answer, Elizabeth continued. "Since you're the first in a long time to try, I'll reward your courage. It's been, although there are a lot more of you than us, we have been around longer, much, much longer. We started many of those rumors centuries ago," she laughed. "So many different ways to deal with us. I bet you wonder, which is true? Are any of them true? Why do you think your village made the pact with me? You know what they tried first, right?" Roza was breathing hard as sweat cascaded down her body, but she felt she could move enough to reply, calling the church. They abandoned you, my dear Roza." Elizabeth licked her lips and flashed a grin, showing that her incisors were now long fangs. "Abandoned you because they honestly don't know how to help. And more so, they convinced themselves that some person or people in your village must have committed some grievous sin, that you actually deserve being my cattle to assuage their own conscience. Tell me something. Did anyone try to send for a hunter?" Roza nodded slowly, which only made the Countess laugh harder. "I thought so. Want to know why I didn't stop them?" She was then behind Roza, embracing the girl close to her own body. "As few of us there are compared to you," she whispered. "There are even fewer of you that know the real way to kill us. So few, I doubt your message will reach someone qualified to come to your village's aid. Now, I just have two more things to say. One, although you didn't hurt me much, you didn't make me thirstier than usual. I hope to be able to enjoy this longer, but sadly I can not. And secondly, I rewarded your courage, and now I will punish your defiance. I keep a copy of the record of which family sends their daughters to me, and after I'm done with you, your precious sister is next." No! With the final part of Roza by Michael Guzman. "I rewarded your courage, and now I will punish your defiance. I keep a copy of the record of which family sends me their daughters to me, and after I'm done with you, your precious sister is next." "No!" Roza felt a last burst of defiance in her. "The agreement. Do you think they'll withhold her from me if I threaten my full wrath?" Elizabeth licked Rosa's neck. "That agreements can't be changed. You and your people are mine to do with as I please, and no one will forget it." Roza shuddered in revulsion, and tears cascaded down her cheek as the countess embraced her. She closed her eyes, and the sharp fangs upon her neck were the last thing she felt. As a disclaimer, for all gruesome tale and story, permission has been obtained from the author or authors, or is a public domain content. And a special thank you to the author, Michael Guzman, the second editor and producer, Jenny Elliott, Fae Corps Incorporated, Jody Collins with props, Nathan Dabbs, Karen Darwin, Cassie Elliott, and Sophia Elliott. Thank you for listening, and I hope you like and subscribe, and tune in next week for another spooky adventure. Thank you.